Welcome to The Real Story. I'm your host, Riley Lewis. Thank you for joining us. Today's top story brings us to the latest developments on the war between Russia and Ukraine. The conflict continues to be a significant and tumultuous situation, deeply impacting not only Eastern Europe, but also the entire international community. It's highly complex, fragile, and fluid, and there appears to be no end in sight. Now, to date, both countries have seen significant casualties and damage since the war began, and the intensity of the fighting remains high in eastern Ukraine, particularly in the Donbas region, where Ukrainian forces are trying to regain territory. The fighting is intense but localized, and Russian military operations are focused on key strategic locations in southern Ukraine too, such as the Kherson region. Case in point, Russian airstrikes on a hospital and a prison in southern Ukraine reportedly killed at least 19 people on Tuesday. And 16 of those deaths happened in the prison in an attack that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said was deliberate. The prison's dining hall was destroyed, and the inmates found themselves amidst broken glass, rubble, and chaos. What's more, a separate missile strike recently killed several other people, reportedly including a 23-year-old woman who was pregnant, bringing the total death toll in Ukraine to 22 people in just 24 hours. And recent Russian airstrikes have also targeted Ukrainian military installations, evading the country's anti-air defense systems. However, at the exact same time, Ukrainian forces have conducted their own strikes against Russia, with one notable missile drone attack recently targeting Russian supply chains in the Crimea area. So it's one big cycle of tit for tat, attack and counterattack. And while Ukrainian counteroffensives have allowed them to reclaim some of the ground they've lost, Russia still controls about 20% of Ukraine's territory. And such developments indicate that diplomatic negotiations to achieve peace have yielded very little progress, if any. And that brings us to the most important question at the center of this whole entire war, which is this: are there any potential paths toward lasting peace between Russia and Ukraine? More specifically, are there any paths toward peace between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky? Now, the answer to that complicated question is certainly up for debate. However, one thing is abundantly clear here: getting them to be on the same page won't be an easy task. After all, they've spent years and years now exchanging barbs, and their terms for a peace deal seem to be irreconcilable, putting President Trump in a very tough spot. Now, speaking of Trump, he shortened the 50-day deadline that he previously gave to Russia to make progress toward ending the war or face a new round of tariffs to 10 or 12 days on Monday. And then he doubled down on that plan on Tuesday. He said Russia must agree to a ceasefire by August 8th or run the risk of facing sanctions, putting the pressure on Putin to make a decision. Now it's only a matter of time and a matter of waiting to see exactly how he responds. But in the meantime, Trump is also turning up the pressure on one of Russia's largest trading partners, India. That brings us to a Truth Social post that he uploaded earlier today, in which he wrote this: "Remember, while India is our friend, we have, over the years, done relatively little business with them because their tariffs are far too high, among the highest in the world, and they have the most strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers of any country. Also, they have always brought a vast majority of their military equipment from Russia, and are Russia's largest buyer of energy, along with China, at a time when everyone wants Russia to stop the killing in Ukraine. All things not good. India will therefore be paying a tariff of 25%, plus a penalty for the above, starting on August 1st. Thank you for your attention to this matter, MAGA." So now the whole world will just have to wait and see what happens. And it's unclear what will happen next, as tensions still remain quite high and the situation fluid. However, there are really two options on the table: either make peace or fight this out on the battlefield. It's a simple choice between non-violence and non-existence, not just for the people of Eastern Europe, but for the world. Millions of lives are at stake here. The whole planet is watching, and Russia just so happens to be a nuclear power. And the longer this battle drags out, the less likely peace seems to be. And the alternative to peace is more bloodshed, more destruction, and more instability in the region. So while tensions do remain high, the Trump administration continues to use every bit of leverage it has to avert any more catastrophe before things spiral out of control. Now, here with his analysis and reaction is Berquist, a former counterterrorism intelligence officer and host of This Is My Show. Drew, thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So I have a lot of questions for you, and I want to start with this one because this war is over 3 years old now. It continues to go on without any end in sight, and I want to know why the West is taking a side in it. I am an American, I'm not on Russia's side, I'm not on Ukraine's side, and I'm really just trying to figure out, honestly, why is the West so invested in any side of this conflict?
Yeah, well, it really comes down to, and it's an unfortunate truth as it pertains to this conflict and a lot of other conflicts, if we're being honest, but it comes down to, because it's not our fight. You're right. This is something that we never should have really truly been involved in, and yet we're very, very involved, particularly behind the scenes. But it boils down to there's money in war. There's so much money to be made by so many people when conflict breaks out, whether it stays at skirmish level conflict or whether it rises up to regional conflict and war like you're seeing here, or God forbid something bigger. And unfortunately, that's just how our system's always been, and it's tough to come to that realization as an American and see that and see, hey, why are our taxpayer dollars being used this way? Why are our representatives taking us down this road? Because it doesn't make any sense, but it does for them.
So if you could elaborate, please, for me, who do you think is specifically profiting off of this war?
So there's so many folks. Obviously, there's folks who are in office who are tied to defense contractors, you name it, different companies who are tied in, who benefit, and their products and or services are more needed when there's conflict. So we always keep conflict going. That's something that we do in the intelligence world a lot, is sometimes we spin up conflict for the sake of having conflict. So obviously the defense military industrial complex as a whole makes a lot, but it's really their buddies with these big companies, these products, whether it's intel, whether it's a physical product that could be a HESCO barrier, that protects bases and forward operating bases. It could be people who have food contracts. It could be, what we love to do as the United States, and we're terrible at. We're good at so many things. We're good at taking over a country, defeating an enemy, but we love to get into nation building and or repairing an area, fixing an area, bringing democracy to an area. And those things are guys for being there for the long haul and spending lots of money so other people can make lots of money.
That's interesting. Now, aside from the goal of making money, I want to ask you, Drew, about a possible ulterior motive, because you have Ukraine, this corrupt country in Eastern Europe, far, far away from the American people, that has nothing to do with America's politics whatsoever. Understood. And there's this very weird and unexplained interest in them politically. And when the war broke out in February of 2022, a lot of Western leaders said, we have to defend Ukraine because it's a democracy. Ukraine's not even having elections right now, so I don't buy that. But I do want to get your thoughts about their end goal. Talking about NATO leaders, people like the Biden administration, I think their real end goal is regime change in Moscow. I don't know that, but I want to get your thoughts about what their real political goal is here on the ground.
100%. Well, and obviously there's more layers than just money. That is something that keeps it going and motivates people back here. But it's ultimately, it comes down to power control, which then create pathways to resources. But there's resources are always a thing. And then who do we want in there? We're really good at, and people don't know this in the American public, most of the time, some people do, but we're really good at regime change. There's been a lot of suggestions. I think that they would love it if they had someone who was a little less tough than Putin, because like Putin, don't like Putin. Obviously he's not our friend or ally, but Putin is a strong figure. He's a strong person. So you want someone out of there. You want someone in Ukraine like Zelensky, who's not a strong figure, who we can control. Because typically in these situations, I'm not saying that we did in this situation, although I'm not saying that we didn't. Typically, we put someone into that position so we can dictate how things go on that side. So there's a lot of things here. There's resources. There's the ability to keep Ukraine safe, because Ukraine is used for a lot of nefarious things in and through and kind of surrounding our government. And then again, there's the war component and the profit and everything that comes from that. So there's multiple layers to it, but we're always behind the scenes. I say always, most of the time. There are things that do just happen and take their course normally, but most of the time we're pulling levers behind the scenes and kind of playing puppeteer, if you will.
That's really interesting, Drew. Using them for nefarious things in and around our government. Could you explain some of what those things are?
Sure. Well, I mean, you see money laundering that's gone through not just Ukraine, but Ukraine has essentially been, and that's not to say there's not great people in Ukraine. There are. We probably all know some. But the Ukrainian government has long been corrupt. It's long been a state that's not really doing much on its own. So it's been used by power people across the globe, politicians included, to channel money in and out. You've seen it for Democrats have used it. There's all sorts of reference points you can look to where money goes in there under this guise, think USAID type stuff. Okay. Not necessarily always that. And it comes out on the other end and it lands in a politician or a corporation's pocket. So there's a lot of people who have a vested interest in keeping Ukraine in play, which is, I think, one of the reasons, not the only reason, why for the longest time as this conflict has raged on, the West, it's happening now under President Trump, but the West under Biden and under the Ukrainian leadership never pushed for an off-ramp to peace for Putin. And that's not defending Putin, but we push for this to continue on, have people on the ground there. I've known people on the ground there for years now. So we've always kind of poked the bear and kind of poured gas on this flame, just in a very subtle, shadowy way. Interesting.
I'm glad you said that too, Drew. Look, I'm not here to defend Vladimir Putin. I don't trust him. I don't have any loyalty to him or to Zelensky, just as an American citizen. But I do have a particular interest in Ukraine because that's where my tax dollars are going. So I want to know where the money is going and what we're funding and what the underlying strategy is. And aside from just making money off of war, which I think is pretty evil in a lot of ways, actually, I don't understand what the West is trying to do here. I think we're getting closer to it because Putin is not a globalist. He's a nationalist. And you have these big international organizations, whether it's NATO or the UN, that are looking for complete dominance on the world stage. I think that's the real plan here. I think it's the Great Reset. I don't know that for a fact, but I do want to get your thoughts about that theory of mine.
Yes, well, I think that you're onto something. He's a big threat because he's the leader of a big state actor like Russia, one of the biggest players in the game, has been for a long time. He in particular has been in the game for a long time on an individual level, and people fear him. They respect him and they fear him because they know he means business. But when he means business, he also does not play along with the rules. Hey, the global elite, the WHO, all these, the World Economic Forum, they want you to go this way, and he's the kind of guy who just says, no, I'm not doing it. I'm going to go this way because this is what I want to do, and this is what maybe I think is best for my people, but certainly is best for me and my country. So he's a massive threat to anyone who wants to change that world order, change how we operate, not just as a particular country, but as a global community. And that's absolutely always been something. He's a massive thorn in their side.
Well said. So to end things, just to put a bow on it, Drew, are there any potential paths to peace between Putin and Zelensky? I think there could be between the people of Ukraine and Russia, but specifically between these two figures.
I think Zelensky has to play by our rules because he needs to understand that we're in charge here. And I know he doesn't like to hear that. None of these guys that we've put in power do. But it comes down to that. You have to play by the rules. We've got to step off the gas a little bit on what we're doing behind the scenes, not just in terms of providing weapons and financial resources, whether it's directly or indirectly through NATO, because that's obviously a threat. If you're Putin and you see the biggest power in the globe, the United States, giving weapons and ammunition that are being used against you, that's obviously something that's going to be hard to get over. And even though I'm very much on our side, if you're on his side, you see how that's a problem. So I think we've got to rein in Zelensky. We've got to stop doing things behind the scenes to include our intel and some of our different forces on the ground. And then we've got to tell Putin, like, we don't want you to take anything over beyond what you've done, but we're not going to make you give it back. And I know Ukraine doesn't like that. You guys sort that out. We're going to step back and let you guys handle this like big boys, even though I don't think Zelensky is a big boy. But like, we're going to let you do it. That's really the only way. With us as involved as we are behind the scenes, it's going to be tough to get to that point.
Understood. I think you're completely right about that. We'll have to see what happens. I know this administration is dedicated to peace, but respectfully, it's not our fight at the same time. So I want peace, absolutely. I trust in the Trump administration wholeheartedly. But we will see what happens in the coming days and weeks ahead. But in the meantime, Drew, I just appreciate your insight into this very complicated issue. So thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Coming up next, a police officer joins us to discuss the details of a mass shooting in New York City. More details about it and the investigation into it after the break.